Hello, I'm the Resolute Cartographer, and this is the story of what happened to Vault 96. Located in a remote region of Appalachia, Vault 96 was opened during the Steel Rain content in July 2021, giving us the opportunity to explore this previously enigmatic Vault-Tec vault. Note that this video will cover only the lives of the original research team of Vault 96, and that I will cover its later resident, Edgar Blackburn, in a different video. The story of Vault 96, as with all vaults, starts in the years before the bombs with Project Safehouse. As the United States and the Communist Chinese hurtled headlong towards war and an eventual nuclear conflagration, Project Safehouse was established to construct shelters across the United States. Named Vaults by Vault-Tec, the company established to build them, the ostensive purpose of these shelters was to provide a small fraction of the American population with a way to ride out the worst of the nuclear bombs and to emerge to rebuild America. Vault 96 was designated to be an animal ark, intended to preserve the biodiversity of America by holding a large stock of animals in cryogenic storage for eventual release into the post-nuclear world. The staff would also attempt to cure genetic mutations in the fauna that survived outside the vault. When the vault door was sealed on October 23, 2077, as the old world came to an end outside, the members of the staff had their first meeting. There was a grand total of 5 people at this meeting. Their leader would be Eric DeMarcos, a 55-year-old professor of computer science at Vault-Tec University in Morgantown, with a PhD in computer science. He worked at VTU for 15 years, serving as the Dean of Computer Science from 2070 to 2074. He also held a secret-level federal security clearance and had worked on many classified programs. Eric would now serve as the overseer and chief software developer for Vault 96. The facility's maintenance would now be taken up by Hans Memling, a 64-year-old professor emeritus at Hamilton University with PhDs in nuclear and cryonic engineering. Dr. Memling would now serve as the chief engineer for Vault 96. The Vault's robotics staff, though, would be maintained by Jeanette Higgins. A 41-year-old with a PhD in robotics, Dr. Higgins had worked as a senior engineer at Robco, serving as the senior developer on the Assaultron robots. She would now become the chief robotics technician for Vault 96. The lead researcher for the Vault would be Nina Valaya, a 44-year-old with PhDs in genetics and biology, and the founder of Chromax Genetics. The last member of the 5 was Molly Cooper, a 29-year-old with a PhD in biology and a former researcher for Dr. Valaya's company, Chromax Genetics. Dr. Cooper would serve as the Vault's chief biologist. When these 5 entered the Vault and realized that they alone were the staff and residents of the Vault, they were shocked. This revelation was followed by another blow. The supposed purpose of Vault 96, to serve as an animal ark, was a lie. Instead of saving animals and repopulating nature with healthy animals, they were going to conduct genetic experiments on the animals brought in from the outside and those stored within the vault. They would be creating mutation serums that were intended to provide countermeasures to the dangerous animals created by the bombs. They would inject these serums into the animals and record the outcomes of pitting them against each other. The recipes for the serums would then be transmitted off-site for analysis and deployment. Regardless of any objections to this cruel research, they would work on these experiments or they would die. The revised Vault instructions made it clear that those who failed to meet the research quotas set forth by the Overseer would be terminated. When we say terminated, we're not talking fired. These scientists were not permitted to leave the Vault. If they failed to reach the research quotas, they would be executed. The immediate reaction to this was an understandable anger at their new Overseer, Eric DeMarcos. The others thought that as the Overseer, he must have had some foreknowledge of this change of plans. One quick note. Though all of these scientists could likely be referred to as Doctor, based on their level of education, from here on I'm going to simply refer to them by their first names, as that's how they refer to each other, and I want to avoid as much confusion as possible. Resigned to their new fate as an enslaved research team, the staff settled into their new roles. Though Nina was upset that she'd been tricked, she was excited about the opportunity presented by the research conditions. Happy as Nina was, she noted that Molly was inconsolable, and that she regretted dragging her into the situation. Molly's admittance had been a condition of Nina's agreement with Vault-Tec to be a resident of the Vault. Forcing the animals to fight each other made Molly sick, but she worked alongside Nina as she didn't have another option that didn't result in death. The staff was awarded credits for their research, with these credits going towards the research quotas. The research quotas Eric assigned started out as 4 per week, so low that Nina and Molly finished their first week of work in less than an hour. Meanwhile, Jeanette continued to believe that Eric was in on Vault-Tec's scheme, but she got to work regardless of this, doing the best she could with the out-of-date robotics fabricators on site. Having expected to work into his retirement years on a range of projects, Hans delighted in the challenge offered by their situation, and he fixed a reactor leak before the Vault's emergency management system even detected it. Eric was happy with how well the staff was working, even if he was the chief target of their ire. Though he didn't make them aware of it, their anger with him was matched by his own anger with Vault-Tec. He served the company loyally for 15 years, and now he was trapped in a role unlike the one he'd been promised. In the years before the bombs, his position had involved guiding the students of VTU in the creation of programs for the Emergency Management System, a database of programs meant to solve almost any problem that could arise in the vault. Trapped in this prison, he now noted that with the EMS database also holding programs designed to handle giant mutant insects, premature psychoactive chemical release, and subliminal messaging system failure, that his position was not among the worst possible. Over the coming months, Hans grew to know the Vault's systems like the back of his hand. He noted that much of the equipment was sadly out of date or low quality, but he kept it all running and soon began to make improvements. Though Jeanette couldn't understand why Vault-Tec provided such a small research team, she kept the robots working while continuing to curse Eric. She was happy to see him in his office all day long working at his computer, keeping out of their way. Nina and Molly continued their work in the lab as the research quotas rose every week. They began their research with what they viewed as obvious avenues of enhancement: venom production, health regeneration, and electrogenesis, all naturally occurring traits that were open for exploitation. In October 2078, this work yielded a serum that made electric mole rats capable of producing small amounts of electricity. The quotas only continued to rise over time, and by late June 2079, the quota Eric handed Nina was up to over 200 research credits a week. Molly noted that Nina had always been a workaholic, a feature that had made their dating difficult, but she was now in the lab past midnight every night. Even when the week's work was done, she remained in the lab, always working on something new so that they wouldn't miss the coming quotas. On June 31st, 2079, they tested a regeneration serum on a bear, which functioned to both heal its battle wounds, but also to generate multiple superfluous limbs. They ended up shelving that line of inquiry and moving on to other potentially fruitful lines of research. Nina and Molly would soon be to the point of having finished all the work they could on standard, naturally existent phenomena. They had become more creative: chameleonization, pyrokinesis, cryokinesis, whatever it took to keep ahead of the quotas. While she hated the quotas, Nina loved the work, and she was astonished at her own productivity. Molly eventually gave up on asking her to take a night off, knowing what was at stake. By December 2079, Hans and Jeanette had joined Nina and Molly and the research team, doing whatever they could to help meet the quotas. Every week, Eric continued handing them higher and higher quotas, while continuing to sit in his office all day long. January 2080 brought with it experiments in creating pyrogenesis in gray wolves, or, as it's more fun to say, they were making fire wolves. The first test of this on January 12th was a complete loss, with the wolf bursting into flames as the serum was injected. This was especially jarring for Molly, who had never liked the work, and saw in this wolf an image of a beloved family dog. The next wolf was a bit more lucky, as it survived the injection and managed to generate fire. When it did die, however, it exploded, destroying Test Chamber 3. Even with dangerous events like this potentially possible in every experiment, the quotas demanded the work continue. When July 2080 rolled around and Nina and Molly were looking for new avenues of research to pursue, they came across a specimen codenamed X001. The mainframe refused to retrieve this specimen, bringing them tissue samples when requested, but never the whole creature. To make matters more strange, tests run on these samples yielded confusing results. Under a microscope, the organelles of the cellular material were unidentifiable. When run through a DNA sequencer, the equipment yielded no results. Undeterred, Nina decided to inject serum into random cellular structures and see what happened. This experiment proved incredibly fruitful, but continued to confuse Nina and Molly. The serums they had already completed worked flawlessly in the X001 samples, conferring the intended mutation without skipping a beat. The mutation then jumped to the next sealed petri dish, and then the next, and then the next. How is the tissue able to transfer mutations in this manner? Wanting to examine the specimen that was the source of these samples, but unable to find it, Nina and Molly asked Hans to search for X001. He came upon a strange discovery. In a vault that listed 85 cryogenic bays full of animals, why was there an 86th bay? Why was this bay hidden at the back of Bay 85, behind a tungsten-plated door with military access controls? Along with this, while other bays contained a multitude of animal-filled pods, a peek inside Bay 86 told him that there was only one cryopod in this bay. A cryopod labeled X001. Hans shared this with the group, but they couldn't find any method by which they might access the sealed bay. The samples of X001 did help progress the work on a new serum though, one that allowed the test subjects to phase through space and reappear in another location. On August 22, 2080, they tested this new serum on a bloatfly, causing it to shift from place to place evasively until it phased into the torso of its attacker, killing them both as their bodies merged. It was at this time, in the closing days of the 148th week, that Nina knew she wasn't going to reach the research quota. She had soldiered on against the overwhelming tide of the quota, but this week's required 568 credits was too much. Nina had hoped that accessing Subject X001 as the source of the mutation would have allowed her the opportunity to fix the phasing serum, but Eric refused her access to Bay 86, and now she was out of time. Jeanette was furious with Eric. They'd all been working their hardest to assist Nina, while Eric sat in his office typing away at some unknown task, potentially reports for Vault-Tec, she thought. She stormed into his office and demanded that he help. The next day, August 24th, 2080, the mainframe registered that a quota had been missed. An Assaultron entered the lab and aimed its beam on Nina. Molly tried to get between the Assaultron and her love, but it threw her aside and fired, burning Nina's head clean off. This was undoubtedly a sobering moment for Jeanette, having created the Assaultrons in the first place. The next morning, Sunday, August 25th, 2080, the staff met so that Eric could hand out the week's quota. Molly was still crying when Eric called the meeting to order. When Jeanette began tearing into Eric, he disabled one of the vault's sensors and began to explain the truth of the situation they'd been living in for the past almost 3 years. The quotas he handed out? They were not his quotas. They were the mainframe's quotas. He showed them the list of requirements for the month of August as given to him by the vault. When Jeanette had stormed into the office the day prior, he hadn't realized that she was behind, but he tried to log into her account to attempt to make her appear more productive and potentially earn enough credits to prevent her death. But it had been too late. He also explained why he hadn't told them this. The vault's mainframe was on a hair trigger. If it had sensed any conspiracy against it, the mainframe would use the vault's robots to murder them all. He'd weathered their hatred, taking all the blame so that they wouldn't target the true culprit and bring about their deaths. He had spent nearly every waking hour of their time in the vault writing a virus to take the mainframe down. This is why he had avoided socialization and helping in the lab. He'd been in a race against time to save their lives. With Nina dead, there was no chance of meeting week 149's quota. Their only possible option was to work together over the coming week to destroy the mainframe before it could kill them. His virus, named Seraph, had been the product of a project he had led before the war. It was a Class 4 hypergenetic virus intended to penetrate the security of and seize control over high-level mainframes and their network infrastructure. Unfortunately, it was only in prototype stage when the world ended, hence the nearly 3 years of frenzied coding. Though Hans pointed out that the emergency management system that Eric had created was in place to root out problems like Seraph, Eric dismissed this threat, saying, quote, "I designed that system. My students wrote the damn protocols. I can beat it," end quote. With their assistance, Eric believed that they would be able to beat the EMS and get out of the vault. They had until the coming Saturday to prepare. Eric adjourned the meeting as the EMS system allowed the vault to fix the sensor he had disabled. Eric finished his virus over the next few days, risking logging into the EMS database to attempt to prepare his virus for anything that it could throw against them. He related in a final log on August 31st, 2080, that he was happy his students hadn't been too diligent in their work, or he'd have a harder time beating the EMS. The time for action came in the afternoon, shortly before the vault was going to examine their credits and see if they'd met the quota. The plan was to inject the virus into the mainframe, then attack the vault at multiple locations at once to overwhelm the system and counter the EMS's countermeasures. One by one they hit the vault, breaking circuits, causing a reactor brownout, and detonating a bomb in cryogenics. Unfortunately for Eric, Hans, Jeanette, and Molly, Eric hadn't been prepared for the mainframe's superseding Protocol Omega, which sealed the exits and marked them for termination. One final attempt by Eric to utilize his virus was detected by the EMS, and Eric's data stream was quarantined. The bots moved in, and within seconds, the staff was dead. The story of what Vault-Tec did to these people is incredibly made worse when the Overseer's orders are examined. This line in particular is horrifying. Quote, "Once all other residents have been terminated, if at least 250 weeks of research were successfully completed, you and you alone will be permitted to exit the vault." End quote. This means that the second that Nina, Jeanette, Molly, and Hans entered the vault, they were living on borrowed time. The only way that the experiment could end well for Eric is if everyone else had died after they provided 250 weeks of slave labor to Vault-Tec. Along with this, we can basically see that there was no way that Eric would have survived either. Nina and Molly were some of the brightest minds in their field, and Nina had a work ethic second to none, and yet they only made it to 148 weeks. How could they have ever hoped to reach the 250 weeks required for Eric to survive? Alright, that pretty much covers what happened in Vault 96 up to August 31st, 2080. As mentioned at the beginning, I'll have another video covering what Dr. Edgar Blackburn did in the Vault, but there are still a couple of things that I want to mention pertaining to the original research team's lives within the Vault. First, we learned from Blackburn's investigation of Vault 96 that Eric in fact succeeded in destroying the mainframe's hostile programming with his virus, which is why the Vault was able to serve as Dr. Blackburn's lair. The virus seems to have either finished its task after they were killed by the mainframe swinging as it went down, or that the virus did its work, and then the mainframe's base level, beneath what the virus killed, purged the Vault as a built-in countermeasure. Secondly, though Nina had died believing that Eric could have gotten her access to Cryo-Bay 86, this was not the case. Eric's own instructions informed him that any attempt to tamper with the door of Bay 86 would result in the termination of all life within the Vault. Third, we still don't know what was kept in Bay 86. Let me just list a few things that we do know about it. A. It has to be kept in an extremely secure section of the Vault. B. It appears to be awake in spite of the fact that it's supposed to be in cryogenic stasis. C. The warnings about entering Bay 86 included a warning that all samples should be treated as extremely hazardous and handled with all possible caution. This may be related to its propensity to spread mutations across sealed petri dishes. What if it could spread those mutations to living beings as well? And D. Whatever this specimen is, it's capable of phasing through space. I don't know what this thing was, but even a Flatwoods monster doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. I've also considered that it might be whatever the creature was that was sealed up in the basement of AMS, but I don't think that is likely. Back to the overall list though. Fourth, the Vault is likely as icy as it is because of the bomb the staff detonated in cryogenics as they were attempting to leave. Fifth, they seem to have been unwittingly assisting the Enclave at the White Spring Resort. Just as the White Spring science team was working on mutation serums, so too were the staff of 96, and they were transmitting their results out for outside analysis and deployment. Just as Nina and Molly couldn't quite get their regeneration serum to stop making superfluous limbs, the Enclave had the same problem with healing factor, and it took them a long time to get it right. And sixth, though it's not explicitly stated, I think that what ended up killing the staff was a protocol produced by a student that had created a mainframe antivirus program. This protocol, named AV992 Virus Mainframe, was, as Eric defined it, quote, the most over-engineered protocol in the entire database, end quote. He had awarded his student, Aisha Hunter, with an F on the assignment, complaining that there were too many overlapping contingencies, and, ironically, he told her, quote, assuming your protocol could defeat something like that is the height of hubris, end quote. If it was indeed her program that defeated him, this comment of his alone would make the irony thick. Well, in the end, he did defeat the mainframe. It took him with it. Alright, that should do it for Vault 96, for now at least. Next time, we'll examine the life of Dr. Edgar Blackburn and the horrors that he wrought within the Vault. If you want to get notifications when I launch these lore videos, you can follow me at Gaming with Maps on Twitter. If you appreciate what I do here, and you want to support the channel financially, you can become a patron on Patreon. To that end, I want to thank my patrons, Mesothelioma, 76 of Texas, and Jill AWS, for their support. This has been the Irresolute Cartographer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.